On this week's Not the Top 20 podcast, in the FA Cup, we enjoy the miracle of Miron Muslic, the dark green banana skin of Plymouth Argyle with a right bold display to make a splash against Liverpool. Elsewhere, Ortega's mega dive can't stop Donnelly's Cup classic. In the Championship, things were looking a bit hairy for Sheff United before Raksak had a crack. Warning warns out at Derby, who will be the next Rams shepherd. In League One, big away wins down at the bottom for the Shrew Army and the Shoe Army. Stockport made it 5 wins in a row with a quintessential performance. And good Godden, would you look at that? Charlton are in the top 6. In League 2, there were some classic fourth-tier shenanigans. And we're asking, can Sparky provide exactly that for the crumbling Cumbrians? All that and more on Not the Top 20 podcast. And the Championship segment this week is actually going to start in the famous FA Cup, where the second tier's bottom side beat the top team in the land. All season on the betting show, Argyle have been 1-0 fodder, George. And here they are beating Premier League leaders, Liverpool, 2-0 at Home Park on Sunday. The magic of this specific cup competition.
This was, I think, as much as I've enjoyed a game of football or I'm a neutral forever, maybe. Like, it was absolutely incredible. It was just exactly what you want to see if you're a neutral watching a game of football, where, you know, the FA Cup gets a lot of hate and a lot of slander. And I actually think what's happened is the competition has changed a lot, and we know that. And 15, 20 years ago, when Fergie was threatening to take United out of it and teams started resting players, we were told it was the end of the FA Cup. But football has changed immeasurably since then. And when previously playing, rotating your side meant playing a much weakened team, now it means playing Federico Chiesa and players who are still immensely talented. And you look at teams like Liverpool and like Tottenham and other sides who play European football and have played European football not in the Champions League recently, and you see that teams, these are Europa League teams. These are teams that regularly play European football, and therefore the allure and the scalp remains intact, I would say. And there's no longer that issue where people say, oh, you've only beaten their second string, because realistically second strings are now really, really good. And that was the case here when Liverpool turned up. They clearly rested a lot of players. They played 2 or 3 kids who haven't played much first team football, but they still had a lot of quality in the side. When you look at the players they brought off the bench as well, the likes of Jota and Darwin Núñez to go alongside Luis Diaz, who started, it's still a very, very good team. And
worth mentioning that some of Liverpool's best young players who have almost never played for their first team, who do they go on loan to? Middlesbrough in the case of Ben Doak, Sunderland in the case of Jayden Dans. I mean, I realise those are 2 players who weren't part of this game, but again, it just sums up the quality of the elite academies now, means that their academy kids are top-level Championship players straight off the bat.
And I also think there's an element where it felt a while ago like these teams saw the cup as a bit of a distraction and were pretty happy to go out of it. And I definitely don't think that's the case here. Like, you look at the way that Liverpool, tried to get back into the game. It's a massive embarrassment to them to lose it in the manner that they did. Because frankly, and this is the most important point, often in cup ties where the minnow beats the big team or the giant, it's a smash and grab. And although Liverpool dominated the ball and dominated possession, there's no question in my mind that Plymouth Argyle deserved this. Like, at 0-0, they were by far the better team. In the first half, they created the better chances. They were much more of a constant threat compared to Liverpool. Their out-of-possession shape was absolutely superb. They wouldn't let Liverpool dominate in the middle of the park. They allowed the centre-backs to have it themselves. Every time they tried to shift it wide, they'd have 2 men over who would basically prevent the attack from developing into the final third. It was like a masterclass of like a trigger press from a low block, and Liverpool didn't know how to deal with it. And I watched in midweek, Liverpool against Tottenham, where Tottenham, completely against their general, the way that they generally play under Postecoglou, looked to do something similar, where they dropped off, they sat deep, they tried to defend their 1-goal lead, and Liverpool were able to carve through them consistently at will. Yes, they had Mo Salah playing, which might make a bit of a difference, but Argyle coped with the threat way, way better. And when the goal came, which came from a penalty, thanks to a foolish, Harvey Elek basically jumped with his hands above his head, and the ball was hooked into his hand. Ryan Hardy converted the penalty, and I'm not going to pretend it was like fully deserved, but if either team deserved to go ahead at that point, it was absolutely Argyle. And they coped with the onslaught that came afterwards pretty well, where yes, there were wave after wave of attack, but no, they weren't consistently breached. It wasn't until a Jota kind of spinning shot that was relatively comfortably parried away by Hazard. And then the best save of the day, and the one moment of absolute quality from the keeper, came from Darwin Núñez's header, which again, he should have done better with. A point-blank header from 6 yard out, Hazard coming back across his goal, managing to get there and tip it over the bar. An unbelievable reaction save. The defensive unit, I thought Sorinola was unbelievable throughout the game. His one-on-one defending was absolutely exceptional. His ability to get Argyle to kind of spring out again in possession, and then
everyone's loving the big beefy new boys as well.
Yeah, I mean they were Maxi. I mean we're going to call him Maxi now because that's how he wants to be known, and it's much easier to say. And Katic, very quickly gone past Simon for my favourite Katic. Katic and Maxi, both were sensational. They were so good. It was a backs to the wall defensive. We are going to head and kick everything you throw at us, and they absolutely did that. It was so entertaining as a contest. It felt like the stakes were incredibly high for both teams. We've got Argyle side who have really struggled in the league this season, have had very little to cheer about, with a new manager who's just overseen 2 massive results against West Brom and Sunderland, up against a Liverpool team who, were the favourites to win the FA Cup coming into the game, and have been rolled over and have been unable to score and have been embarrassed. And you look at the reaction of their fan base, they've absolutely been embarrassed. It was entertainment in the purest form that a contest can be. And so often now, I used to watch, and I still do watch a lot of the Premier League, less now because I've got fewer work commitments involved in it. And I like the Premier League, and I will continue to do so. Whenever there is a big Premier League game, I will endeavour to try and watch it. But I increasingly feel like the Premier League is like a showcase of talent rather than a contest, where it's a great way to see brilliant players. And every so often you have a big relegation clash or a big title clash, which is a bit different. But realistically, it's a league where most teams finish in mid-table with kind of little to play for beyond, European qualification, some competitions that realistically they end up playing a second-string team for anyway. The FA Cup is an ability for proper games between two sides with loads at stake. And Plymouth Argyle probably aren't going to win the FA Cup. But that's not what it's about. This is a day for them and their fans to turn up and see their team roll over the top team in the country, one of the best teams in Europe and the world, and do so deservedly and feel immense pride. We get very few moments in our live supporting our football teams which can give you 10 out of 10 euphoria and joy. Those are promotions generally. But winning these games, winning individual games, whilst it may not be as important as 3 points, gives you exactly that. And I'd have loved to have been on the Barbican yesterday in the Dolphin with Plymouth Argyle owner Simon Hallett, as we have been in the past, because I bet it was some party. Absolutely incredible, and full credit as well to Leyton Orient and to Birmingham, who went toe-to-toe with Premier League teams and completely deserved to stay in the game as long as they both did, both leading in their games.
We're going to take on Birmingham and Leyton Orient's Cup exploits in the League One segment of the pod as we try to map out what was just an incredible weekend of football to tell you about across 4 competitions, 3 leagues in a cup. But I get excited for the annual George Elek FA Cup epic monologue, and it didn't disappoint. And I'm excited to know there's more to come in the League One segment, albeit without the glory for EFL clubs at the end of it. Last Monday I said that Argyle have had main character energy this season, and it just gets more and more ridiculous. Like that incredible 1-0 win at Griffin Park in the last round is now just like completely overshadowed almost by what happened in front of their home fans. And of course, still bottom of the Championship and still loads to do. And I do think one part of the very large and, a conversation about the Cup these days has so many aspects of it. One of them is not just about second-string teams and what it means to get a scalp, but also, George, this sense, and I wasn't around before the 90s, but I get the sense that the FA Cup in itself was treated as seriously, if not more seriously, than league competition, more back in the day than it is now. And for me, Argyle are now an incredibly interesting case. I am not an Argyle fan, so I am not going to even try and project what they are feeling right now. And frankly, less than 24 hours after one of the best days they've had supporting their team, I'm annoyed at myself for even bringing this up. But will there be any Argyle fans thinking, you know what, if you'd offered me a deal with the devil to know what it was like to beat Brentford and Liverpool, because that's important. You know what the feeling is. But if you could go back 4 weeks to before that game at Griffin Park, and I'd offer you Championship survival for next season, but you go out 2-0 to Brentford, I'm really interested to see what they say. Because, of course, they still have the opportunity to stay up in the Championship. And you could make a case for this being a positive for that because of the vibe around the place, the buy-in to what Muslic is doing, the new players and the way that they've assimilated into the team. But of course, there'll be people who say, oh, that's a distraction, isn't it? That's taking energy away from league performances, and that's the bread and butter. So I do think that the whole discussion around the cup is a difficult one. There are with lots of things like this, so many different things at stake. I'm just glad that every single year, without fail, we get to talk about the cup with complete glee, with complete joy, and you say things like, that was the most I've ever enjoyed a football match as a neutral. So congrats to Argyle. The last thing on Argyle, it is not lost on me, George, that it was reported when Wayne Rooney was appointed that they would be having documentary cameras following the club this season. It was reported when Wayne Rooney left that those documentary cameras had been switched off and been returned home, and the documentary would not be going ahead. And it is not lost on me that by far the most interesting month of Plymouth Argyle's season so far has happened in the month after those documentary cameras have been switched off. And I'm a little bit sad about that, not least because of the cup wins, but also because of handsome Miron, who's come in with his viral dressing room speeches. And if that's not good documentary fodder, I don't know what is. Elsewhere in the cup, championship teams, Burnley beat Southampton. Is it a cup set when there's only like 2 places between the teams in the league table? Yeah, I think it still is. I mean, watching Southampton's attempt at defending the goal that Burnley scored made me think they weren't particularly fussed about this one. But it was scored by Marcus Edwards. And one of the things I've been thinking about the Championship in the last couple of weeks is we now have a quality of player in the Championship far beyond, I think, anything that's ever existed before. And I think Marcus Edwards, albeit I can't profess to be an expert on the player, what I do know about him, what I've read about him in the past, he's another one that joins the Championship and just makes it shine with just a bit more star quality than I can ever remember. He scored the winning goal. Burnley got another clean sheet. They're 59th in a row. We also saw, perhaps most excitingly for me, we saw a rare sighting of the dribbly Belgian, George. Manuel Benson was on the pitch playing for Burnley, which I didn't realise was a thing in the year 2025. But surely they could do with him like just cutting in off the right and spanking in a few goals over the next couple of weeks and months. I mean, we know he can.
I remember you saying in that season that it couldn't be sustained, and he sustained it for basically a whole campaign. And I wonder, maybe Burnley have just taken variants so literally with that. Let's not find out. Let's not let him have another 40 shots in a Burnley shirt and not score any of them. Let's just call it quits now whilst we're ahead.
I would buy that approach if they hadn't been very publicly trying to buy Morgan Whittaker, who had his own Manuel Benson season last year.
But I was looking at Benson as being someone I was surprised wasn't linked with a move away in January. He was kind of quite strongly linked to a move to Leeds in the summer. But having had an injury early in the campaign, didn't really get back to full fitness. But good to see him back starting again. I mean, amazing that Burnley have again kept a clean sheet. Like it almost feels like a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy where early on in the campaign, they were keeping clean sheets, not conceding many goals, but running pretty hot. It feels to me like, if anything, their defence has got better in the last few weeks. And now they're actually not really conceding any chances, let alone goals. I'm
just pleased for Joe Worrell here, because he's just been sitting watching the young lads get all the clean sheets. And then the gaffer's given him a start here against a Premier League team. I wouldn't be surprised if his confidence had taken a bit of a hit in the last few months, Joe Worrell. But there you go. He can play and they can get a clean sheet as well. Well done, Joe. Leeds, you mentioned, they lost at home to Millwall. 2-0 as well. 2 deflected Miguel Aziz strikes and a fantastic string of saves from Roberts in the Millwall goal, including a penalty save from Pascal Strout. Means it's an incredible couple of weeks that Millwall and Alex Neil have had. 3 wins in a row in the league to ease relegation fears, and now in the hat for the next round. Coventry didn't have such a good time as they did last season in this competition. Pumped 4-1 by Ipswich. For me, watching the highlights here, it's just nice to be reminded of Jack Clark and George Hurst. It's amazing how quickly you can forget stars of the league when they go up to the Premier League, and I'm not sure either of them have had the best time of it. So it's nice to be reminded of their qualities, and actually how often players who get promoted to the Premier League just improve as players because the level they're playing at and the level of training and coaching is even higher. And then Blackburn lost 2-0 to Wolves. No upset there. Stoke and Cardiff went head-to-head. Ding-dong 3-all. 2-0 to Cardiff, then 3-2 to Stoke, and then 3-all. Ruben Colwell with a brace for Cardiff. Kumas with a brace for Stoke, and Colwell with the winning pen. Cardiff are in the next round, as are Preston, who drew 0-0 with Wycombe and won on penalties. I always get excited at this stage when there's 5 championship teams left in the competition. There's every chance that we could have 2 championship teams drawn against each other in the next round. Let's say a Millwall Preston or a Cardiff against Argyle. And if that happens, all of a sudden there's a guaranteed spot in the championship in the last 8. And who knows from that point. Let's hope we get another trip to Wembley to watch a championship team play in an FA Cup semi-final. There's every chance. In the Championship, over the weekend, reduced fixture list, but some big stories. George, Sheffield United 2, Portsmouth 1. On the face of it, doesn't look like a huge story. It looks like exactly what you'd expect. But the way the game played out and the performances of the two teams, absolutely not what you'd have expected. Portsmouth possibly putting in one of their best performances of the whole season, certainly on the road, surely on the road. Bishop played through early on, well tackled by Cooper when he was trying to go around him. Callum Lang put it over the bar from close range. And then I genuinely watched Blades' first goal and I think Portsmouth got overconfident because they were playing so well. Because they're playing forward from the back and they give the ball away, poor touch I think it is from Lang, and the shape is so poor. And they are instantly left with 4 Sheffield United attackers on 3 defenders and away from home at Bramall Lane. That feels non-ideal, right? Harmer popping it in for 1-0. But not fussed about it, get their confidence back. Level 3 minutes later, Murphy crossing for Ogilvie. The sort of goals that Sheffield United weren't really conceding earlier in the season was something that I thought watching that, but exactly what Pompey deserved. And they weren't done there. Murphy off the bar from range, Murphy beating his man, crossing, and Ogilvie putting over from a few yards out. The first half was an absolute battering, but Brewster to Raksaki for the winner. Sheffield United saw it out. What are your main thoughts?
Just how frustrated John Mousinho will be, albeit also happy that his team have put in a much better performance. It's a bit of a trend at the moment. For the first half of the season, there were certain teams who we could be pretty reliant on not turning up in certain games, Argyle away being one of them, Pompey away being another one. But this was by far and away the best performance from Portsmouth away from home, as you said. Interesting that both Argyle's best away performance first good away performance came at Sheffield United, and then the same has happened with Pompey. Now, it's not really the place you'd anticipate the teams would go and thrive. The fact that Sheffield United have taken 6 points from those 2 games is frankly crazy, because they were second best in the first half against Argyle. They were second best throughout this game, although Ryan Brewster will feel like he should have scored late on with the ball that hit the bar to make it 3-1. Josh Murphy was by far and away the best player on the pitch here. He had, just after I spoke about Harry Clark last week on Bottom Up Corner, and said how good a signing I think it is, and I maintain that, and almost the kind of attacking threat that I said that he carries was shown in the second half, where he went close with a shot that went wide of the post, having come from the right hand side, something you wouldn't see Alfie Gilchrist doing. Murphy had him on toast. Murphy had, when he plays like this, Josh Murphy, you see the player, but he probably could have been with a slice of luck here or there. Like he probably is in terms of his talent.
Just particularly funny as he has an identical twin playing
exactly
for one of the top clubs in the Premier League.
And Josh was, as they say, as a kid, seen as the better Murphy of the two. And you can see that because Jacob Murphy, so much Premier League analysis in this podcast today, but Jacob Murphy is like very, very scrappy. He works incredibly hard. And Murphy does that too, but there's an inch of quality that you see in him that maybe you would see in Jacob if he was playing in the Championship too, that is just beyond the level. It's his ability that there are so few wingers at Championship level whose delivery with both feet is so good, and they also carry that incredible goal threat. And, in terms of physicality and pace, he's got most fullbacks on that as well. And when he's in a mood like this, he's basically unplayable. He was incredibly unlucky not to score. He rattled the crossbar with a great shot in the first half. Cooper made a pretty good save in the second half, albeit had it been either side of Cooper, he probably wouldn't have been able to save it. He's just one of those, when he's playing well, he is a constant outlet. And with Portsmouth, it was just a case of them getting the ball to Murphy as often as possible. And when he's in that kind of form, he's always going to be creative with it. He put the ball on the plate for Lang in the first half, who skied it over the bar. He got the assist for Ogilvie for the first goal. And yet Sheffield United won the game through a moment of quality from Harmer, although I did wonder if maybe the keeper should have done better with that one for the first goal. And then a good bit of work from Brewster and Raksaki to make it 2-1. But realistically, on the balance of play, Pompey should have finished their chances and at least been ahead by the time that the sucker punch came.
getting to the stage of the season where the classic not the top 20, like performance-led analysis of the game, trying to be the ones not to always focus on the result and say X team won and are good, X team lost and are therefore bad. But we're getting to the final chunk of the season now where, that stuff, it doesn't necessarily mean as much. For Sheff United here, they've got away with one. I think the positives are they flexed their new January transfer depth, right? 4 starters here: Clark, Chowdhury, Brereton Diaz, Cannon, Rob Holding coming off the bench. As I live and breathe, Rob Holding in the Championship. So exciting. But I suppose
so exciting.
Maybe that isn't a positive, because with that extra depth, they didn't look very good, and so they're going to need to hope for some quite quick gelling, I guess. The main positive is points on the board. They're 3 clear of Burnley now. They are 5 clear of Sunderland now, because doubly good for them with Sunderland dropping points at home once again, nicking a point at home once again, you could say, given the lateness of Dennis Serkin's equaliser in their 2-2 draw against Watford. I'm watching the highlights here, George. It goes 1-0, and then the next 1 or 2 chances are Sunderland's. Lafay is purring, just doing stuff that you shouldn't be seeing on a Championship pitch. And I'm thinking, knowing what the full-time score is, what on earth is going to happen here for this to finish 2-2? And quite a lot happened from that point, right? So with Bayo suspended, Watford went with a young striker, Doumbia, up top. Looked lively, athletic, ran the channels well, and having sent a really good chance, a headed chance straight at the keeper, he then managed to get to the ball first and drew a foul to win a penalty that was scored by Dele Bashiru. Then Imran Louza scores one of the curliest curlers of the season so far. Just incredible bend on it. It lacked a little bit of the power of other long-range strikes, which made me wonder if the keeper should therefore have got across quicker. Then you see how far outside the post it is basically the whole way. You can't really do much with that as a goalkeeper. An incredible strike. Louza almost scored from kickoff after Sunderland's equaliser, which wasn't shown on the highlights package. I don't know whether it was like if the ref hadn't blown his whistle and brought it back. I don't know if they got the corner. I haven't seen anything about that. But Louza shot from the halfway line and Patson had to tip it wide. Could have been one of the great Championship moments of all time. But Serkin did equalise 2-2 from a corner. And I wonder if this is sort of disappointing for both sides in the end, George, in that the nature of Sunderland's 2 goals, both set-piece concessions for Watford, really horrendous goals to concede for any team. Any head coach would be just so furious about how softly they were scored. And for Sunderland, well, clearly it's disappointing because they've now dropped points at home to Argyle and Watford, and if you've got designs on top 2, that ain't going to get it done.
Yeah, I think for Sunderland, looking at the last 8 games, they've dropped points in 4 of them. And when you consider the run of games they've had, you probably would have anticipated the drop points would have come against Sheffield United, Middlesbrough. They won both those games. The drop points have come against Burnley, where they missed 2 penalties in the last 5 minutes. Plymouth Argyle rooted bottom of the league at home. Stoke away from home, currently embroiled in a relegation battle, and then Watford at home last time out, who came into this game, with massive issues in terms of players missing through injury off the back of a disappointing transfer window, with expectations surrounding the manager. And if you're a Sunderland fan, you're probably feeling relatively frustrated that you've dropped points within these games, having done so well elsewhere, and in doing so lost ground on Burnley and Sheffield United. They were okay in the game, for the strike from Louza. There's nothing really you can do about that. But I think the biggest frustration will probably be that they weren't able to win the game, having got it back to 2-2, with Isidore missing a really good opportunity 1-on-1, where he tried to put it through the keeper's legs and just failed. I don't think he did too much wrong with that finish.
Calling it the George Elek curse here, because something happened between you and Wilson Isidore over the last week or 2, where you just suddenly decided he's one of your favourite strikers that we've ever seen at this level, which I love, by the way.
Well, that's a bit far, but he's one of my favourite strikers in the league right now, for sure.
Did you not say his ball striking ability is one of the best I've ever seen? You said on the betting show you think he should be a starting Premier League striker right now. That's pretty... I doubt you'd have said that about too many champ strikers from the last 5 years.
There aren't many strikers around.
Yeah, exactly. 2-2 in the end. 2-1 at the Hawthorns. West Brom 2, Sheffield Wednesday 1. Stoppage time bedlam.
This was, I mean, I watched the first half of this game live and then could watch the second half until later, but it was a pretty good game, like relatively end-to-end. West Brom dominating possession, as you'd expect under the new manager, Tony Mowbray. And were deserving of their lead, I would say, when it came. The best player for the most part of the game was James Beadle in goal for Sheffield Wednesday, who made a string of saves to keep them in it at kind of all moments within the game. And the goal from Adam Armstrong was a really, really clever finish, just kind of guided into the back of the net with his left foot with 15 minutes to go.
Adam Armstrong, West Brom striker. I did a lot of that. I did a lot of that over the weekend. As I crept up on us. Caught a flight at 8:00 on deadline day on Monday, and then have been, I think it's fair to say, pretty off comms for the whole of last week. So going through the games, like the amount of times I'm watching the highlights being like, who's number 42 for this team? And then having my mind absolutely bamboozled. Pelly Ruddock and Panzu plays for Rotherham now, for example.
I mean, I think it's a very shrewd signing and someone who will offer an outlet for a side who I now expect to carry a huge attacking threat. And he was a constant goal threat within this game and a very, very clever finish to get the goal. After that, Sheffield Wednesday came back into it. Patterson scored just at the beginning of injury time, scoring his own rebound in what looked like it was going to be a really strong point off the back of what was a pretty good second half performance from Sheffield Wednesday. But there was a sting in the tail. Mikey Johnson had a shot from range, which Beadle thought probably he'd made his finest and final save of the game before Jason Malumbi steered in at the near post. And, the sad fact is that Beadle will probably feel like he should have done better with that. Yes, it came very sharp at him at the near post, but he got down to it. It was a relatively comfortable area, I would say, rather than right in the corner. And he only managed to parry it into the side netting. Bedlam, Malumbi running off down the touchline with his shirt off. Another dramatic win for Tony Mowbray at home as his somewhat fairy tale, albeit there was that defeat at Argyle in the middle. But certainly the home form is incredibly strong. I'm off to the Hawthorns next Saturday to watch Oxford, and I'm excited and hoping that maybe that run will end.
But hopefully you don't get a nosebleed. Obviously, incredibly high above sea level, isn't it?
Yes.
Or is it close to sea level?
Very not
I've
close.
Forgotten.
Definitely not close.
No. I've absolutely mucked this up. There's a famous fact about the Hawthorns, like gets trotted out by old anoraks every time you're anywhere near the Hawthorns or it gets brought up. And I've completely forgotten whether it's the highest point above sea level of any stadium in England. Is that right? I think so. I don't want to type while I'm talking, but there'll be a lot of people screaming at this, which I enjoy the idea of that. Well, either hope you don't have a nosebleed if it is altitude. It's not. I mean, it's not exactly La Paz away in the South American World Cup qualifiers, is it? But do you know Adam Armstrong's played 201 games under Tony Mowbray in his career, the most by any, 140 more than he's played for any other manager. 85 goals in 201 appearances. That bodes pretty well for a team who definitely could do with someone scoring at that rate. It was Fellows' 11th assist of the season to set him up. You didn't mention the ruckus at full time, which was caught on the extended highlights that I watched on the plane. I don't know what happened, and I don't want to allege things that weren't true. So I'll just say a separate fact, which is that Jason Mollenby is a bit of a wind-up merchant, and I did see some quite angry Sheffield Wednesday players, and I saw a fairly gleeful Jason Mollenby in the vicinity. It was actually Kyle Bartley who ended up getting sent off after the whistle, so he'll now miss 3 games. Not ideal. I've got my eye on not just Adam Armstrong, but also Will Lancashire, who West Brom brought in on deadline day from Spurs. He's a guy who scored a ton of goals for Sheff United when he was like 16 in their unders. Spurs bought him. He was the PL2's player of the season and top goal scorer last year. Now, I keep trying to remind myself that PL2 goals don't have a very clear exchange rate into championship goals. We've seen that with even Callum Marshall, who went to West Brom last year and wasn't, it was decided that he just wasn't up to it at that point. But I'm pretty excited to see this kid. I've got to be honest, it looks like he strikes a good ball. And I'm also interested in their goalkeeper situation, West Brom. That's something to keep an eye on. They sold Alex Palmer to Ipswich. They recalled Josh Griffiths from Bristol Rovers. I'd say he's been one of the best shot stoppers in League One this season, so I'd hope that would translate pretty well. But it was Wildsmith who got the start, and I wonder how Mowbray is planning on managing that situation, because it'd be a shame if Griffiths came back only to sit on the bench for the next 5 months. He's in such good nick. But I guess there might be an extent to which, if Wildsmith's been in the building for the last 6 months, he gets a start and it's sort of nominally his gloves to lose, but probably Griffiths coming in soon. We'll see. I'm interested to see what happens there. Really tough one to take, really, for Wednesday, when you consider that, if they're to make a heroic playoff campaign, West Brom one of the teams that they'll likely need to get above, and at 1-1 between the two teams, there's only 2 points. That's now 5 because of that Mollenby goal. Elsewhere, Norwich 1, Derby 1. It was a lovely goal from Josh Sargent. Nice exchange of passing with Mark Condes. But actually quite a poor attacking display from Norwich. Very much not in keeping with how they've been at times at Carrow Road this season. Only 2 shots inside the box in the whole game here against Derby. And if you don't score the second goal, you are always open to a sucker punch. And that's what happened. Jack Stacey foul on Marcus Harness, put his head where it hurts, and won a penalty scored by Jerry Yates. So, big point for Derby. The losing run ends at 7. They did it without Paul Warne in the dugout for the first time in best part of 2.5 years. For Norwich, that late goal, a bit like what I said with Wednesday, it's really damaging for them. It's basically a 4-point swing in stoppage time. If you consider, again, they're trying to chase down West Brom, and West Brom went into stoppage time drawing, Norwich winning. Instead, West Brom win and Norwich draw. But Paul Warne sacked on Friday. The sacking itself, somewhat of a surprise, but not entirely, George, after 7 league defeats in a row and moving into the relegation zone. The timing of it, maybe more of a surprise on a Friday afternoon. Don't see those very often. David Clowes, the Derby County owner, chairman, saying, Paul's a man of great integrity, embodies the values we hold important at Derby. No fan should ever forget his contribution in securing promotion to the Championship. I certainly won't. However, results in football dictate decisions, and we felt that to give us the best chance of retaining our Championship status, the time was right to make a change. Your thoughts, please?
I can understand it, and I'm not surprised that he's been sacked. I think it's kind of a bit of a classic sacking, where they've been quite poor in some games recently and lost them. They've been okay in some games recently and lost them. So when you're overseeing a period like that, it's probably going to be quite hard to keep control of your job, especially in an environment now at the bottom of the Championship, where there are quite a lot of teams who are embroiled in this relegation battle, who, for some reason or another, often due to a change of manager, Hull, Oxford, Argyle, are suddenly improving. And it's therefore no shock to see Derby thinking, ooh, maybe we need to do the same thing in order to ensure that we're not going to be one of these teams that are in the bottom of 3 when the music stops. Surprising, though, in the statement where he says, the time is right in order to make the change. They had 2 games within 4 days after this sacking. A game on Saturday away at Norwich and a game on Tuesday at home to Oxford. Having had the whole week to make this decision, I'm pretty surprised that they decided that the time was right on a Friday afternoon to make this call. Like, I assumed, like everyone else, when there was nothing in the actual statement, that they had lined someone up and that there would be an announcement shortly afterwards as to who the new manager was going to be, and that's why it had come on a Friday. Given what's come out afterwards around this official approach for John Eustace, I wonder if there's an element where they just didn't want to do bad by Warne, where maybe it became apparent to the club that a former player in Eustace, someone who's incredibly popular at the club already, who I think to most of us would have seemed unattainable to them, if they got wind on Friday morning that he was actually interested and maybe his representatives had reached out to the club or whatever, had alerted to them to the fact that they might be able to get him, given the immense respect that David Clowes clearly holds Paul Warne in, maybe it was a case where he didn't want to make an approach or didn't want to do anything whilst there was a manager already in place, in which case I can kind of understand it, because if it is going to be Eustace, it makes sense to get him in as soon as possible. And no massive damage done due to the Jerry Yates penalty on Saturday, where they took a point which I'm sure Paul Warne would have taken had he still been in post. So, yeah, I do get it. Warne is a manager who had a few opportunities to keep Rotherham up and failed to do so, albeit, you assume he would have done so relatively comfortably in the season where he left, because they were pretty high up in the league when he chose to move on, albeit early on in the campaign. But he's someone who, for whatever reason, seems to thrive in an environment in League One of taking teams to the top of the table. When he gets to the Championship, maybe he's just caught out a little bit by the tactical nous of those that he's up against. But
one of them
I don't think too
John
much would have had to have
Eustace.
changed. I don't think too much would have had to have changed in their recent performances for him to pick up a few more points and probably still be in the job.
Quick yes or no, is it fair to say that if Derby were to appoint John Eustace in the next few days, you would think that was a pretty damn good appointment for them?
Yeah, for sure.
So,
I think their chances of...
And I think we've been clear how good we think he is. So I think maybe the more interesting question before we move on to League One, or before we move on to Swansea's incredible away win at Bristol City, is, to those listening wondering, why would John Eustace leave Blackburn Rovers in and indeed around the playoff places for the Championship relegation places? What do you understand the answer to be there if he does leave, and it is reported that he wants to speak to Derby at the very least?
I think the answer to that is what the answer often is in these questions, where as fans we look in and we can't really work something out. It's just that we don't know. We have absolutely no idea what the work environment is like at Blackburn Rovers. We've got no idea what the relationship is like between John Eustace and the Venkies. We have no idea what the relationship is like between Rudy Gestede, who is the sporting director or director of football at Blackburn, and John Eustace. We've got no idea. And maybe it's just a case where Eustace, and his family, who presumably are more local to Derby than they are to Blackburn, and he just wants to spend more time with them, or we don't know. We don't know. And it's impossible for us to say, like, why would he do that? Why would he ever do that? And it's boring to see Derby fans on social media being like, 'cause he's coming to a massive club. We're a bigger club than you. Of course he's going to do it. Like, I don't think John Eustace is sitting there at his desk thinking, do you know what I'd love to do is play games in front of like 10,000 more fans. That's exactly what I want to do. But there's an element where, in terms of potential,
I think there is. Well, I think the big club thing that makes almost zero impact ever on this podcast, because you and I are not that interested in it at all. I think within the game, it is a much bigger deal. I don't know how much, but I think it's a much bigger deal.
Blackburn won the Premier League. That's what their fans are like, oh, we won the Premier League. So you don't want to be a club with amazing history. Again, I don't think John Eustace is sitting there being like, oh my God, Kenny Dalglish won the league here in 94-95.
What I like is that at the start of this answer is you saying we don't know. And a few minutes later, we've got into a position where we're having the most ridiculous hypothetical discussion about something that we have no idea.
For sure. Like, maybe it is those things. My assumption is it's probably to do with inner politics and circumstances in John Eustace's life, professionally, personally, who knows, that means that he would like to be Derby manager rather than Blackburn Rovers manager. And we don't know what that is. We don't know what he's paid at Blackburn. We don't know what they're offering him at Derby. We just have no idea. So and there's every chance, I'd be surprised, but there's every chance he goes and speaks to Derby and thinks, you know what, actually, maybe the nice people at Blackburn will give me a new contract instead of losing me.
Yeah, but that's a bit that I find interesting about this. I don't think this necessarily should be the case, but given how publicly it's been reported that he's keen to talk to Derby, for me, just the way the game works, that is very hard to come back from if you don't then go. It will always be held over you, even though you said no eventually. I don't think fans really care. I think there will be a chunk of Rovers fans, whatever happens, who will go, hold on, mate. Grass wasn't greener, and now you're back here, but tarnished. So we'll see. I expect he'll be the Derby manager next week.
Same, but I also think if Blackburn this afternoon tweet he stays and they're with a Leonardo DiCaprio meme and he's signed a new contract, they'll be delighted. And they'll order over Derby and say, look what happens.
Okay,
maybe the beast.
Quick quiz question. How many of the 72 EFL clubs are managed by someone who is over 2 years into their tenure? Out of 72. Paul Warne was one. He is now not one.
7.
Oh, I thought you were going to say 14, which would have been the correct answer. Which is...
I was going to say 5.
Where 14 out of 72 is 19.5%. Just under 1 in 5 clubs have a manager that have done more than 2 years. Two managers that haven't quite reached that amount of time yet. Great segue. Liam Manning and Luke Williams. Certainly not the scoreline expected by us on Sunday at Ashton Gate, George. Bristol City 0, Swansea 1.
Yeah, a very topsy-turvy game this. For the first half an hour or so, it was just wave after wave of attack from Bristol City, and it was going exactly by the form book. And it looked like Bristol City, it was going to be a matter of time until they scored. The key player in this, the goal came midway through, or quite fairly early in the second half. Time and prodding home from a rebound where O'Leary probably should have done better. And in my mind, that's the story of this game, where between both boxes, Bristol City were probably the better team. It's definitely the case when you include set pieces. Lawrence Vigouroux made 3 really good saves, like really, really good saves. The best 2, one from Sam Bell at 1-0 with about 15 minutes to go, where I was watching it live, and when Sam Parkin on CoCom said, I think he's touched it, I thought, what is he seeing here? And then you see the other replay, and he gets tiniest of touches onto the post. Absolutely ridiculous save to get that tiny diversion to knock it onto the post. One from Luke McNally, where the ball comes in from Twine, and McNally kind of wraps his leg around the defender and manages to prod it into the far corner. And again, Vigouroux somehow reads it and pulls off an unbelievable save to tip around the corner. He was, and then from Jason Knight, which is probably the easiest of the lot, but even so, Knight with a really powerful header relatively early on from a set piece that he parried over the bar. There'll be a lot of soul searching from Bristol City fans and frustration about their inability to turn over a Swansea side and take their chances. Swansea will feel like it was a huge step forwards from given where they were coming into this game and how poor they've been defensively. But I realistically think this is a case where most Championship keepers in goal, Bristol City are probably 2-0 up relatively early in this game and go on to win it relatively comfortably. And I think Lawrence Vigouroux probably deserves Player of the Weekend in the Championship over the last couple of days, because I can't really see any other player that had such a big and obvious tangible impact on their team's success, because without him, I don't think Swansea would have won this game.
Yeah, just only really quick point of interest for me on Swans. I talked about the Matt Grimes departure last week and what it means for them tactically. They didn't end up signing the kid from Man City's under-21s. They did end up signing Lewis O'Brien, very clearly not the same sort of player as Matt Grimes. So we're starting to see what they will do in terms of how they build up in particular. And their touch map I found really interesting. It looks to me like they were basically trying to avoid the middle of the pitch entirely and build up, and trying to avoid high tariff turnovers like they had against Coventry last week for Thomas Asante's goal. You see the average touch map and heat map of Franco, the right-sided central midfielder in the pivot, and it's like kind of, in FM terms, it's like Metzala role. It's kind of all in the right half space. You look at Lewis O'Brien's and it's all in the left half space. You look at Cullen's and Eoms, who are playing nominally as the 2 10s, and they're even wider. And then you've got Timon and Ronald, who were playing wing-backs in possession. So kind of an interesting one to keep an eye on there. It obviously will mean either the centre-backs themselves, in this case Cabango, Norton and Delcroix, take on more of the responsibility to progress the ball, which might be a bit iffy, or it means that they will just focus everything on wide rotations and trying to build wide and get cutbacks to Vipotnik and I guess Cullen, who's quite good at attacking those. So I'm really interested to watch Swans over the next few weeks. And that was a big win for them. And that was how our brave and handsome Championship lads got on last weekend in the league and in the Cup. There is a midweek slate of fixtures, some quite big games in there as well. Sheffield United versus Middlesbrough blinks on the radar. We will be releasing an episode of Under the Lights, which is our midweek EFL fixture recap podcast. And it's for paid subscribers of NTT20.com only. So maybe, but not if you don't fancy it, this is the week to sign up to NTT20.com. We've left transfer window coverage behind, and there'll be a real smorgasbord of good stuff between now and the end of the season. We can promise you that, including some extra pods, particularly some midweek pods, some Q&A pods from me and George over the next couple of weeks and months. So do sign up on NTT20.com.